Come out to the Infusionsoft Mastermind webinars. I almost said Virtual Academy because that's another series that I run. But welcome out here to the Mastermind call. My name is Scott Richens. I'm the lead here on the training team at Infusionsoft, and I'm excited as always to be with you all here today. Looks like we have quite a few of you jumping on the call here today, and I'm excited for the topic that we have today, which is a basic intro to styling with CSS. This particular topic comes to us from the user voice area where you guys are voting up and submitting different topics. So I'm excited to cover this one, as this was the one that this week had the most interest. So I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit, as well, how you can submit topics and such, what we're going to be covering here in the future. But that's where this particular topic came from today. So again, my name is Scott Richens, lead on the training team here at Infusionsoft. I'm excited to be with you. If this is your first mastermind call, I want to say welcome. Thank you for being here today. This is where we really dive in deep into some of the things that are a little bit either outside of Infusionsoft or a little bit deeper as far as the skill level that goes into some things. What we're diving in today is how to style using CSS, and there's a lot of different things that we can use this one on. So before we dive right into that, what I want to do is I want to preview a couple things for you, make sure you know about a couple things that we've got going on. So let me go ahead and flip on my screen here, and I've got a little bit of a presentation that we'll be going through as we are getting started here today. Actually, first thing I want to do, I want to make sure that audio and video is coming through loud and clear. So if you can hear me, you can see my screen, go ahead and give me a shout out. Let me know where you're coming to us from. That way I make sure I'm not leaving the station with everybody behind. So go ahead and use that questions box there on the right-hand side of your screen. That's how we're going to interact as we go. Again, as I mentioned, if this is your first mastermind or your first webinar that you're doing with me, use that questions section there on the right-hand screen as we go and ask questions. If I can speak to that question as we're going through the presentation here today, then I will do it. Otherwise, I may go ahead and hold those till the end, and I will do a Q&A portion towards the end of this particular webinar. So if I don't answer your question, don't worry, hang tight, know that I will get through that. I will circle back around to go through all the questions. Looks like we got a number of folks jumping in here. We got Daniel from San Jose, Kerry from Tempe, Mike from LAC, all over the place, David from Tampa, Rick from Scottsdale here, some folks from over the pond, across the pond over in the UK. Steve, we were just there last week with y'all, so good to have you here. A lot of folks join us. So here's what we're doing today, or here's a couple of things that I want to cover as we're getting started. Virtual Academy series. For those of you that are brand new to Infusionsoft or may have brand new Infusionsoft users working within your account, I want to make sure that you know about the Virtual Academy. Some folks still don't know about it. It's a free webinar series similar to this one in the sense that it's free. These ones happen more than once a week, though. They're usually 2 or 3 times a week, and they're based on building the foundation within your understanding of Infusionsoft. So we roll it all the way back to the basics. We talked about how to log in, how to create your email. So it's all basics. It's all how to use Infusionsoft, and those are free. If you need to brush up on some of the basics, maybe you haven't dove into the campaign builder yet or anything else, feel free to jump on these Virtual Academy calls. I host most of these myself, pulling a couple of our other gurus once in a while. But you can register for that at help.infusionsoft.com/academy. So go ahead and sign up for those. Again, those ones are free. Also, we have another training opportunity that we have that is called Infusionsoft University. This is where I was last week. We held one over in London last week, and we had 65 customers out to this, had some great feedback, great reviews from those folks that were out there. Every time we do this, it sells out. So I want to encourage you to check out if you are looking to join us for an event. This one is a paid event. This is the primary paid event that we do. It's a 4-day intensive. You can do 2 days of basic, 2 days of advanced. Most people come to all 4 days to join us for this particular event, and it's really just a 4-day intensive on how to set up Infusionsoft, a lot of strategy behind it, and we get into some of the more advanced techniques as well. What we've done is we've just opened up two additional universities. The first one is going to be in August, the 20th through 23rd here at our Infusionsoft headquarters, Chandler, Arizona. You can come here to our home, and we'll train you here. The second one we're going to do is in Orlando, Florida, and that is going to be September 17th through 20th. And those of you are our friends down under there in Australia and New Zealand, we are coming back to Sydney. We haven't yet posted this one on the site, but we will be coming back to Sydney in October. So keep your eyes peeled for that if you're interested in joining us. Again, we when it comes to these events, we sell out these events every time, and we have great attendance, great participation, really have a lot of fun at these events. So feel free to check those out. Again, the information here, infusionsoft.com/university. And back to the point that I was mentioning earlier, today's topic on styling with CSS came from our user forum. We've got a platform here called User Voice that we use for you guys to really drive a lot of the topics here that we're going to cover. I don't take the topics from that every week. Sometimes I'll throw in something that I feel is really important that I hear coming up a lot in the user community and those I'm working with. But 2 or 3 times a month, I will pull from the topics that you guys are submitting. So if there's something that you want to know more about, or you see a topic that somebody's already submitted, go participate in that user voice forum. I try and link out to that each week when I send out an email to you guys. So go post that up, shout it out to your friends, get some other folks to vote that one up. And you can do that at mastermindwebinars.uservoice.com. Again, today's session, we're going to be talking about a basic introduction into styling with CSS. And that one came from Sharon, who had posted that topic, and everybody voted that one up. That was the top vote getter for this particular week or at this time. So when it comes to CSS, I'm gonna lay a little bit of a foundation here as we're getting started. But what I want to really set the foundation for here is where we're going to use this. Why are we talking about CSS? CSS is a web coding language. It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And where CSS comes into play and where it's important is when we are talking about the styling of your order forms or the styling of your storefront and shopping cart. You can also modify some CSS and work with CSS on web forms and landing pages, although we don't surface all of that up to you directly like we do with order forms and storefronts. So if there's any modifications that you want to be making to your storefront and your order forms, then CSS is something that you're going to need to work with. Additionally, and really where Sharon prompted the question from, was within Customer Hub as well. Customer Hub is our add-on membership platform, and so I'm going to be talking a bit about Customer Hub as we get going into this one, because that's what got voted up the most here. But I want you to understand that what I'm teaching you about and what I'm talking about here, as far as the basics of CSS and the fundamentals of CSS, are applicable when you're stylizing any of your other collateral or styles within Infusionsoft, that being especially your storefront and your shopping cart and your order forms when it comes to your sales pages that you're putting together there. So that's what we're going to be talking about. That's why it's important. I also have some things that I will make available to you. I have some resources that I'll talk about. And I want to point out here, I've got my Twitter handle on here, @ScottRichens. If you want to connect with me there, that's where I will post out some of these resources. So feel free to follow me on Twitter. Any questions that you have, give me a shout out and just use the IS Mastermind hashtag there so that others can follow that conversation. So as we're getting started here, I want to talk a little bit about some relationship here between HTML and CSS. HTML is really something that we've got to have a basic understanding of as well before we get into CSS, because they interplay. They work together. HTML really controls our content. It controls our content. It controls the words that are on the page. It controls the links that we have on the page. It controls the images that we have on the page. CSS then are cascading style sheets. That's what CSS stands for. It's cascading style sheets. CSS controls our styling and our layout. Okay. Now, back in the day, back when websites were first being designed, before they had CSS, people would have to stylize the look and feel of all their fonts and all of the colors and everything there directly within the HTML. But we've developed, and the web community has developed a much better way to manage all of these styles so that it's much easier to manage and make changes to your website. So I'm going to show you how those interplay. We need to have a basic understanding of that before we go too far. So I'm going to show you how those interplay. Now, one of the things that we need to understand here about HTML is the concept of HTML wrappers, also known as tags. Okay, and I've got an example down here that includes what are called P tags. Now, P tags are pretty standard. They are paragraph tags. Okay, so notice right here we have an opening tag and we also have a close tag. Okay, and that open tag, you'll notice, has little brackets next to it, and we say P, and then the close tag has the brackets, but it has a /P, and they always come together. You've got an open tag and you've got a close tag, and in between you have your content. So that could be the paragraph and the verbiage that you want there. You may do some headers. So a different tag instead of a P tag might be an H1 or an H2. It might be an image tag if you needed to insert an image. It might be an A tag, which could be a link. There are a number of different types of tags here, but the key is they represent different types of content. And there are ways that we can now begin to interact with those. So let me show you real quick. I'm going to jump outside of this, and I'm going to bounce over to a web browser that I have set up. Now, I created this little page here. There's really not much to it, but this is a very plain page that I want to begin to demonstrate here with you what we can do with HTML and then how CSS adds to that. So what I've got right here is a very plain page. Anytime you want to see the code behind a page, you can simply right-click and say View Page Source. Okay, pretty standard there, and we can see the code. What I'm going to do right now is split my screens here. I have a code editor that I like to use here, a code editor called Coda. That's a paid one. There are a number of free ones out there that I'll recommend to you as well here. And here's what I want to show you. I want to show you basics of how we begin to put some of this stuff together. So what I've got within here, this code right here is what's creating this page. And I've got some different elements in here. So anytime we're creating a page, we're going to have our HTML tags here. We're going to have our head information. I'll talk about that a little bit more. The primary thing is here that it gives us our title. And I'll come in and talk about this other portion right now, or in a little bit. Then when we come down below here, we've got our body portion. Our body is where all of our content is going to reside. And what we're able to then include is these different tags like I just talked about. Notice we've got an H1 tag. We've got a P tag within here. We've got an A tag here for a link, and we've got an image tag here to place our image within this particular page. And what I have within here is very plain. It's not styled at all. Now, there's some different ways that we can begin to add stylization to it. And we can do that with what's called inline styles. Okay, so what I could do right here within my head portion is I could begin to type something up here called style. And then, of course, I want to close that. And then what I could begin to do is identify some of these tags. So if, for example, I wanted to call out this P tag portion right down within here and begin to customize that, apply some styles to it, I can do that. And we begin working with these brackets here. So what I can begin to do is say font family. I can begin to define some of this stuff. Maybe I say I want to do a sans serif font on this one, okay? Here's what happens. Let me refresh my page here. I just saved that. Notice how it changed the text. It changed my text family. I'll talk more about what I'm using here in just a moment, but I want to show you how things interplay here. What I'm doing is I'm creating a style. This is called an on-page style. What we're going to be dealing with here today is what's called a referenced file. We're able to create a separate file that contains all of these styles so that we can change them in one spot, and it can change essentially our entire web page. So what do I mean for that? Well, let's say, for example, I wanted to change all of the fonts that I have on my, let's say, my storefront within Infusionsoft. Instead of having to change that on every single page that we create for your storefront, you can, the way we manage it is through what's called a referenced file. So it makes it a lot easier to utilize. So here's what ends up happening. I've got a referenced file right here within our title that I'm going to uncomment. I had that commented out, which means it wasn't applicable within the code. But now I'm uncommenting that. You don't need to know this, what I'm doing right now, in order to modify things within Infusionsoft. But I want you to understand, again, basically what's happening on each of the pages. So when this particular page now loads, if I save this page and then refresh this, what happens is it just pulled in styles that were referenced here in this particular style sheet. So basically, it's inheriting these styles from somewhere else. So let me go back over here to my presentation. We'll talk about some of these styles that we're able to use. So when it comes to CSS, again, I mentioned CSS is cascading style sheets. This is where we're able to modify the visual elements and the positioning all in one place through one of these CSS files that we have, okay? And what we're able to do with that, we begin modifying these different styles within that CSS. And now here's some of the things that we need to understand when we begin to talk about CSS, okay? We need to understand the different elements that are at play here. So the first thing that we've got to talk about is the selector, okay? When we're talking about a selector here, that selector is identifying one of those tags, and we have different selector options. But notice right here, the first thing that we're doing is we're calling out the selector. We're identifying what it is that we want the style to apply to. The next thing that we have within calling out the selector, then we have our declarations. Now, our declarations is where we are defining what types of styles we want to apply, what types of formatting we want to apply. So, for example, what I have here would be my font family and my font size. It could also be font colors. We're going to talk about some of the additional selectors that you can begin to use as far as widths and borders and padding and a number of different things. But you can put your declarations here, and these declarations have to be within these curly brackets here. Now, our declarations are made up of two parts. They're made up of both a property and a value. So our property is first defining what it is that we want to impact, what property it is that we want to change or that we want to define. And the second part here is our value. So we define our property, and then we hit a colon, and then we define our value, and we end each declaration with a semicolon. And once we're done listing all of our declarations, we have this final curly bracket. Now, here's the thing. You're probably looking at this going, oh, Scott, how am I ever going to learn all this stuff? We're talking about languages. It's like you're speaking French to me or some language that is not your native language. Here's the beautiful thing. If you're using code editors, they make it very easy to use, and I'll show you that here in a moment. But most importantly, this stuff is all over the internet. You can go find all of this information everywhere. And as a matter of fact, most of the stuff that I'm going to show you today is how to modify declarations that already exist, properties that are already defined, so that you can begin to customize what is already in place for you. Okay, we're talking basics here. I'm not trying to teach you how to code from scratch. I'm trying to give you, I'm trying to help orient you to what is available here. What you already have on hand, so that then you can go in and work with it. Everything here is about patterns. When it comes to writing code, it's all very defined. There are just patterns that we can look at and we can work with. So that's what we've got here when we're talking about our CSS styles. When we're defining styles, we got to call out a selector, and then we can call out our definitions, which include a property and a value. Now, there are a couple different types of selectors that we need to understand that are important here to understand. We've got the element selector, we have the class selector, and we have the ID selector. Now, here's what we can do. Under element selectors, this is very important to understand. Element selectors are calling out those HTML tags that I was just referencing. So, for example, that P tag. We have that P tag all over the place. Let me show you that here. And somebody asked me if I can zoom in on here. I don't actually know if I can. Oh, there we go. Okay, fantastic. I've not done that before. So thank you for the heads up there, Daniel. Hopefully that works out better. So what I'm looking at here within, this is my code. Notice I have these P tags a number of different places. Okay, these are my element selectors, and then I have my ID selectors, my ID selector, and my class selector. Those are the three different types of things that we spoke about. Now, when we're talking about element selectors, that means when I define a property, when I define a value for that element, it will impact every element that has that particular tag. Okay, so when we're talking about element selectors here, element selectors are based on those HTML tags, which will be the H1, the P tag, or otherwise. What's important to recognize is it will adjust all elements of that style. Okay, everything that has that P tag, it will then impact. Okay, so these are really your global definitions. These are things that you want to apply to all of those different, all of the different elements of that particular tag. Now, the next thing that we have here is the class selector. Now, a class you can use to then further define things. Okay, it's almost like we have different types of information within Infusionsoft. Okay, this is separate from Infusionsoft, but to pull it to a particular example, you may have a definition that says, "Give me all of my customers," and that would be like your element selector. Give me all of my customers. That's a large group of people. But what if you said, give me all my customers that bought a particular product? There might be a number of people that bought a particular product. That's kind of like our class selector. Now we're narrowing things down a little. We can define a particular class. What a class is, classes, it's important to understand they're identified by a dot, by a period, when we're calling out and defining the class. So for example, it would be dot default text here. It could be the name of a class. What happens here is this will adjust all of the elements of that particular class. So here's what we've got. Right within here, I'm calling out a class. I'm saying class default text. I'm defining each one of these P tags as also having a class of default text. Notice right here, my class here says page title. Down here below, I have a class that says Infusionsoft link. What this allows me to do is format each of these independently through my CSS file. And I'll show you my CSS file here in just a moment. Let's go one deeper, and that is our ID selector. ID selectors are identified by a hashtag, by a pound sign. So for example here, pound first. Now, these ones adjust all elements of a particular ID. It's important to recognize that IDs can only be used once on a particular page. This is a way for you to call out a very, very specific element on a page so that the declarations that you're calling out, the formatting and otherwise that you're calling out only applies to this one particular element. It may be a paragraph, but I only want it to apply to this one particular element. So let's take a look at these. Let's jump back over here into my code editing program, and let me actually show you this file that I'm referencing here, this demo style.css file, so that you can begin to see what I'm talking about. When I go over to that file, and let me zoom in on this one here as well. When I go into that file, here are some of the things that I'm able to begin defining. Notice right here, I call out my P tag, okay? And I say on that, my font family is Arial. My font size is 12 pixels and my width is 400 pixels. Let me go pull up that page again. Remember here, when I allowed this style to be applied, it modified all this information right here. If I wanted to make my styles bigger here, I could say, 14. And once I save that and refresh the page, it just bumped up the size of all of my paragraphs here because it's impacting all of my P tags. Remember, my P tags here, going back over to the HTML file, my P tags were every single one of these. Okay. If I wanted to impact the size of my title, okay, notice right here it says font family, sans serif, font size. This one says larger. I'll talk to you about some of the different values that you can add here. But let me go ahead and just say this is an 18 pixel. Okay, and save that. When I refresh, oops, let me go larger. Let me go 24 pixel. There we go. That bumped that up. Okay, so that made that one larger. But the only thing that affected was this heading because it's impacting the H1 tags. Now, let me show you what we can begin to do with our IDs and classes. So right down here, notice how this ID says first. Okay, well, that is only applied to this very first paragraph. So what if I wanted to change the color of just this first paragraph? Well, I wouldn't define that within the P tag. I would define that with something that's unique to it. I'm going to define that with the ID right here. So I can come in here and I can define something called this is my ID, which again, my selector for that is the pound sign. So I can say first, and then I can open this up and I can say font color. And right within here, I can begin to identify some different colors. Now, there are different things that you can put within here. You know, let's go blue like that, semicolon, save it. And then as we modify that, it can begin to change the particular colors that we have within here. Now, here's what we're able to do, okay? As we begin calling out these different elements, that's how we know what's changing. That's how we know what we're able to edit on the page. Okay, so this is the basics of what we're able to define when it comes to our, when it comes to our coding of the page. Now, let me take that into Infusionsoft. Let me show you what we're able to do here. I'm going to open up a new page here, and let's go take a look. I'm going to open up my .customerhub.net here. And here's what we are able to do. Actually, I had a couple questions pop up there. Give me one moment here. Questions that were just asked. Somebody was asking right here as far as where do we call out those periods and those hashtags that I was mentioning. So back here when I talked about the selector identified by a pound sign or the class selector identified by a period, where those are identified is actually in your CSS file. So you don't have to identify those in your HTML file. You're just calling out an ID specifically. But in your CSS file, that's where we're defining them. So if I were defining my default text, which was one of my classes, I could say default text, and then I can define what that is in particular. So I don't call those out in the HTML file, but I do call those out here within the CSS file. Now, here's why I'm talking about all of this. What we can begin to do within Infusionsoft or in Customer Hub, for example, if I go pull up my style sheets, the style sheet right here is our CSS. For those of you that aren't using Customer Hub, what I'm talking about for you, let me log in here. Oops, just changed my password yesterday. There we go. What I'm talking about for you and where you will be utilizing this is with primarily your e-commerce setup portion, where you can modify your shopping cart themes or order form themes. And from within these, you're able to edit that particular theme. And you are also served up with your CSS right here. And we have our appearance CSS and we have our layout CSS. So this is where you're able to come in and modify that same type of code. Now, I'm going to talk about our Customer Hub code here real quick. This normalized portion, you don't need to worry too much about this. Basically, each browser has different default settings. So by using this normalized portion, what this is doing is this is saying, overwrite all of the browser defaults and let's apply this set of standards for this particular page. Now what we're going to be doing is defining beyond that what we want our styles and such to be. David asked a question here that I want to address right now because it comes along with this. He said, what takes priority? Does the elements or the classes or the ideas, which one ends up taking priority? David, here's how it ends up going. It's based on the order in which things load. So for example, if I define something here and then I redefine it immediately following and I give it a different value, it's whatever the most recent one was that loaded, okay? So it really just depends on the order that you have them listed. That's what ends up taking priority. Now, within here, this probably looks like a bunch of gobbledygook. And you're like, how do I know what to do? How do I know what to edit and what changes? Well, I'm going to introduce you to your new best friend. I'm going to go and view a site preview here. And I'll be honest, when it comes to code, I know a bit of code here, okay? I know enough about code to go in and make things happen that I need to make happen. But I'm not a code guru. I'm not going to go out and build a website from scratch for you, okay? But like I said, there are patterns. There are things that you can begin to utilize. So notice right here, There is a plugin that I've added here called Firebug, Inspect Element with Firebug. If you're using Firefox, what you're able to do, just do a quick search for Firebug add-on, and you can install Firebug. It's going to be your new best friend if you're wanting to go in and make some of these changes, but you're not really familiar with code. What you can begin to do, let me go back over here to this particular page. With Firebug, what you're able to do is click this particular button right here. Okay, this is my favorite one to click, because then what I can do is I can go and hover over these different portions, and notice what's happening here down on the bottom. Okay, as I hit these different areas, it's taking me directly into the code where that particular element is controlled. So if I wanted to modify this section over here, I can take a look here and click it, and it highlights H1 ID logo. Okay, so it's telling me my element selector, I've got H1, and then I've got my ID selector is defined as logo. And then I've got my link within here. Sidebar content, I've got that information right in here. So this is calling out, this is my HTML code here, but if I want to see my CSS code, that's right over here. Okay. So when I'm right over here on the right-hand side, this is my CSS code. So if I need to know how to modify something or what to modify to make a change, I can just take a look right over here and it lets me know. And here's my favorite part. A lot of times we're concerned, we're worried about breaking something. Well, with Firebug, what you're able to do is actually modify the code on page right here to test things out. So if, for example, I said, well, I'm curious what we're gonna modify if I change this. So right here, H1 color is 0, it's all these zeros, which that's a hex code. Well, if I wanted to change it to something else, F3, I'm not sure which one that is. Whoops. Let me go back right here. So I clicked that, and what it did is it took me right over there within my CSS portion here. So what I'm then able to do, if I want to be modifying some of these particular colors, is I can just place in a hex code. That brings in another plugin that I like, which is called Rainbow. So with Rainbow, what you're able to do is actually go match any color that you have somewhere on the screen. So notice I just clicked right there and it gave me this particular color. So if I wanted to modify that and actually change my headers to be that particular color, I can do so. Okay. So that gives me access to all of those different options right there. So again, it makes it very easy to test something out and see what happens. Font weight right here. If I wanted to go oblique, that would make it bold. Okay. Now you may be thinking, okay, Scott, I got no idea. How did you just pull oblique out there versus normal? I don't know what those are. Well, the next tool that you may want to look at is what's called W3 Schools. Like I said, you don't have to remember all of this stuff. You don't have to go through and define or memorize all of these different options. You can just come to W3 Schools right here. And if you're curious, well, what are my options here for font weight? Just go search font weight, and you can look at your font weight property. And this comes in here, and this now says, okay, what are my particular options? Well, my values, remember, from what I was showing you here earlier, we have our property, and then we have our values. So what they're giving us on this particular page is all the different value options that we have. Normal defines normal characters. Bold defines thick characters. So that's like your bold options. Bolder is even thicker. Lighter is more fine. You can then also define certain thicknesses right here directly. And there are sometimes different groups, like I put in oblique. There are different shortcuts and different verbiage that you can use in addition to some of what they have listed here. But if you're ever curious, okay, what do I put? What do certain things mean here? You can just come to W3 Schools, and that's going to tell you pretty much everything you're going to need to know. So like I was saying there, what we're able to do is very quickly reference what information within here that I need to work with. So if I wanted to, for example, go in and change, let's say I wanted to change the background within here. Okay, I've got my div ID sidebar background. Well, my ID here is sidebar background. So what I'm going to do, if I want to go modify within my code my sidebar background, I'll just go back over to this page and I'll do a quick find my sidebar background. And notice it says right here, sidebar background. Okay, I can go in and begin to change things. Now, within Customer Hub, what we've given you, we've actually revamped things recently, and we gave you this whole interface here where you can modify most all of your CSS information from right here. In Infusionsoft, you may not have this particular option. You actually don't have this particular option when you're modifying your CSS for your web form, or for your storefront and your order forms. Okay, you can modify most of that within Customer Hub here from this particular page. And you know where those elements are coming in because it's going to look something like this: style header background. Okay, style.header background. That's actually calling from a different CSS file that's controlled by this particular page. But if I wanted to go in and begin to modify, for example, my style background here, what I could end up doing is I could take this and let's say I wanted to put a different background there. Maybe I want to put a background image. Well, I could say background URL, and then what I can do is I can type in the link for an image. I actually have an image that I have loaded up, com/demo/tweed.png, I believe is what this one is. So if I go save that and go take a look over here again, that should go through and update my background. So notice now how this has a textured background. I found an image that I wanted to use there as my background. So you can then, using your background option, again, go right here to W3 Schools, and if I wanted to change my background, I can place that here. Go search for background. Wonderful. Underneath background, what are some of my different options? I can do background color, background image, background repeat. There are a lot of different properties that I can now use to define. And if I'm doing my background image, it will then tell me right here, we can say background image, and you place in your URL. So really, what I want you to be getting here from today's particular call is the ability to now go through and learn what some of these things mean. Okay, as we're going through on this particular one, again, if I wanted to modify the spacing that I might have up here, wonderful. What I can do is pull up my Firebug, and now I can go take a look at a particular element. Notice right here down below, this is referencing the link itself. Sometimes there's the link, and then there's something that it's contained within. And that's telling me this is my list item. So within my list item, notice over here, I've got float, padding, and position. And this is beginning to relate to me, tell me how things are lined up here. So within padding, it has these weird numbers, 0, 13, 0, 0. Well, let's go take a look at what padding means over here on W3 Schools. What are my different values? If I go search for CSS padding, what I now have here is some of my different options. And it says padding shorthand property. And when I have 4 different elements, it's telling me the first one is my top padding, the second one is my right padding, the third one is my bottom, and the fourth one is my left. So it's just going clockwise there. So what that's telling me, again, back here is I have 0 on the top, 13 on the right, 0 on the bottom, 0 on the left. So if I wanted to widen some things here a little bit, I could change this 13 pixels to 20 pixels. Now again, when I'm doing this within Firebug, it's something for me to just test very quickly. It's not actually changing my code permanently, but it's a way to modify and see what a change would do to your page without actually affecting your code and having to save it to your code. It's a great test environment. Maybe I want to increase the padding there between my different lines a little bit. So I say, 3 or 5, and notice how that then is changing the spacing here between my different elements here, between each of my different lines. Because what that's doing, here's the next one to take a look at, is layout. What that's doing is that's defining what my different layouts are in relation to other elements on the page. So my padding, notice right here, I've got my actual element itself. So this is my home information. Home takes up 38 pixels wide, 25 pixels tall. Padding is the information just around that. If I wanted to add a border, I could add a border and then a margin. So this is how we begin to understand, again, some of the different properties that we can begin to define. I've got my padding, my border, my margin, and my position. Okay, so that's some basics of what we're able to do as we begin going through and modifying some of this information. Again, if you wanted to take a look, maybe you want to change the size of some of this information over here. Okay, well, if I want to shrink down the size right here of this sidebar, maybe I think that's too big. Well, I've got my ID right here as my sidebar content. Let's go take a look at our style. And it says my sidebar content on this one it gives me my background, gives me my padding right here. Actually, let me take a look within this section right here. There we go. Padding, it says 35 and 25. One of the other things that I'm not seeing right here is my width. Width is something that I'm not seeing within here. So let me take a look real quick. If I've got my sidebar, there we go. My sidebar total width, I can shrink that down and hit save. And what that ends up doing is changing the size here of my sidebar. Now, it's important to recognize on a couple of these different things as we begin to go in and modify some of that, what's happening. So notice how that didn't just pull everything over. And what's important to then begin to recognize is this concept called divs. Okay, and that begins to identify like containers of content. So notice right down here where it says div ID, sidebar content. Div ID right here is my entire sidebar. Div ID right here is my sidebar background. Okay, these are groupings and containers of content where it groups things together, and it's kind of like a block of content that we can move around together and we can impact together. So while what I just did was I changed my sidebar size right here, what I didn't impact was my width right here of my content as well. So I've got my sidebar content. And so on my sidebar content, I would have to go in and modify that portion also. So if I scroll down here a little bit further, again, my sidebar content, I've got my padding and such. I would go in and begin to modify that particular padding within there. So we could modify this section here, this portion over here. We would also need to pull all the way over to this, okay? Pull all the way over to match up to this side. So what we can do is we can click on this icon that tells me this is my div ID container, and my container has a margin on the left. Now remember, our margin here is defining this portion right over here. It's pushing it in from the left-hand side of the page 290 pixels. So if I wanted to modify my margin and shrink that one down to 200, that would pull it all the way over to this particular section. So I could go into my margin. Again, that is my main content container. So I'm going to search on my page here. And my margin is 290, so I can shrink that down to 200 and hit save. So again, what that will do is that will then, if I refresh my page here, now what we've done is we've just moved that portion over here. Now again, we're looking at this going, okay, what's going on over on this section? Well, on this section here, again, if we take a look at this, our whole content portion here, our content that we're looking at has a defined width. That width here is 690. So if I just bump the whole thing over 90 pixels, I would need to add another 90 right here, 780, which will then fill the entire screen once again. So style sheet within here. Again, if I go to my content, my container portion here, I could say 780, not 6780, but 780, and hit save. And then once again, refresh. And what I've now done is I've just changed the layout of that particular page. Now, what's going on right here with Customer Hub is the fact that that word is just too long. And so I need to go in and modify that particular portion. That's something to be aware of right there because of the limitation of the side of the sidebar. That might be telling me, you know what, with the content that I want to put there, I'm actually choosing something that is a bit too small. So either that, or I might want to go in and shrink down the size of that text. That's my H1. So my H1 font size here is 36 pixels. Well, maybe I want to shrink it down to 28, and that now fits better within there. So that's really a basic introduction there of to a couple tools that you can begin to utilize as you're going in and making those modifications and want to make some slight tweaks and modifications to your different elements that you have. Again, within Customer Hub, we're doing that here within the style sheets. You can impact a lot of that information here as far as the colors and otherwise just by using these portions right within here. Okay, we've got our colors, we've got our fonts, we've got our sizing. You can impact all of that right here. If you want to start editing your layout, that's when you'll want to jump over here to the style sheet, and you can then begin looking at these specifics right here within sidebar or H1 and your widths and otherwise anything here that has a defined value. That's something that is not controlled here on this particular page. Now, going back over to Infusionsoft, what I was mentioning here was our appearance options. You can do the same thing. If I go to jsr.infusionsoft, actually, I'm just going to say store right here so I can go to my storefront. I can do the same thing here. I can click on Inspect Element with Firebug, and if I want to know how to go in and maybe modify the background here, I can click right on my navigation, and you'll notice it's telling me what is my class right here. What is my position, static, display, all of this information, as well as then what is my element information over here. So this is where I can begin to go in and identify what's impacting this particular page. So we can see what is my display, what is my information here. If I wanted to increase the size here of my navigation, I could now take that and hit 70, and that just increased the overall size there. My margins, again, if I've got 10 pixels and I wanted to try something different there, my margin is impacting the area around it right here, which again is highlighted when you hover over it. Okay, so it's giving you a lot of that information as we go. So that's what you're able to do here. Again, we split it up here between layout CSS and appearance CSS. You don't always have to do that, but we were trying to make that easier to navigate and work with. Notice we're commenting things out here. The following style controls fonts, colors, and background images. And so this is telling us everything right here as far as the body information. If I wanted to try the modify the fonts here, I could modify that. Here's another thing that I want to point out. Notice here how we call out Open Sans and then Lucidia Grande, Lucidia Sans Unicode, Lucidia Sans. We're calling out 4 or 5 different fonts. Now, why are we doing that? What you're able to do with these elements, especially fonts, is we're calling out our preferred font. Well, what if somebody doesn't have that font installed on their machine or accessible? Well, we throw in a comment and we say, but if not that one, then this one. And if they don't have that one, then this one. So we're kind of setting up our hierarchy here. As long as they have Open Sans, that's going to be the font that it's going to use. But if they don't have that, this is our fallback. And then this is our fallback here. So that's why you may see multiple options there then called out. Again, we've gone through, we've organized things here to try and make it a lot easier within your Infusionsoft portion to go in and modify some of this information. So for example, navigation portion right here, we've got #nav, and this is calling out our class of navigation. Right here, what we're now doing is we're calling out something that's our class of navigation, but then we're also calling it out for a couple specific things. This is almost like concatenating. This is pulling together within our navigation class anything that is a list item or a link. Here is specific information that we want to put together. So that's starting to get a little bit deeper within things. But the nice thing is, again, when you are working within here and you use Firebug, if I click within here, let's say I go right here, that's showing me right over here. It's got my nav list item link, nav list item link, and it's showing me all of those styles that are actually impacting this particular page. So if I'm trying to figure out what are all the styles that impact it, this right here pulls it out of the code and summarizes it again here for me. So my padding portion, my border, my color, if I wanted to change the color of it, I could modify that color, but it's surfacing up that information to me. When I want to go modify that in my actual code, again, what I do is I just copy this. I copy that style. We're calling out our ID of navigation. We're calling out the list item here at LI, and then A is our hyperlink tag, our link tag. So when I go back over here to my code, I would just close Firebug and say, you know what, go within here and find me that particular string, because it has to be unique, and it will be right here. So then I can go edit it directly in my code. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover here today as far as some basics. I'm sure some of you have some questions out there, so I want to go ahead and leave some time here for questions. I've had some coming through here, but let me do this real quick. I want to ask a quick question here. Give me some feedback. Let me know how we did here on this particular call. How would you rate the content here on today's particular call? Give me some feedback there. 1 being a terrible waste of your time, all the way up to 5 that you learned a ton. So let me know what we've got going on here, how we've done on this particular topic. What's also nice about this, I want to make sure that we lay the groundwork here so that we can go into some more advanced discussions on some of these particular topics in the future. I want to start laying the groundwork on some different code options so that we can talk about a few different things that you can do external to Infusionsoft. We'll start talking about some of those here in the future. So here's what we're going to do. Go ahead and give me thinking. Oh, 5 more seconds. I'll close that poll down here. We'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. Again, thank you very much for your feedback here. Going to save that. Okay, perfect. So let me take a look at the questions that we got. Wow, we had a whole ton of people here join us from all over the place. Let's see. David was asking, David said, why do the order forms no longer gather initials on agreement like they did on legacy order forms? David, I'm not certain specifically on that. I know the decision was made to go ahead and pull that particular option. I think there were actually really some concerns with that from the perspective of how it was being used, and the fact that that actual information was not stored anywhere in relation to the contact record or the order itself. So there wasn't an actual legally binding recording of that within Infusionsoft. So at this point, I think it was removed. I think there have been some folks out there that have developed something similar to that you can paste in there as far as code. So you may want to search the web for that, David. You may be able to find that information. Daniel, again, thanks for the feedback there when we were working in Coda so that I could increase the size on that. Some of you were asking here about about what I was using here to edit my code. This is a particular file, a text editor that I choose to use. This is a paid editor. There are a lot of free ones out there that you can use. For example, one called Komodo Edit. It's a free one that you can get for both PC and for Mac. They've got a free version that you can download. And really what the code editors are helpful for is they do a lot of cool things for you that your editors, for example, ours right here, doesn't do for you. This one, if I wanted to go in and add anything new, my nav, and then I wanted to code everything, I have to code it all from scratch. Notice it's not prompting anything for me here. I have to go in and type all of that information. Code editors are smarter. They know kind of what you're trying to do. And so, for example, if I wanted to type in something new here, when I hit my first opening one here, I can then choose. Once I hit a P, it says, hey, here are the most common things that people will do with a P tag, or when they start with P. And so I can choose that. And then it's allowing me, if I wanted to do an ID, I can say ID equals, and when I throw in one quote, it throws in the second one, right? So if I wanted to then say first on this particular one, great. Then I can come over here, I can say class equals, and again, it throws in that little set of information for me. So it makes it a lot easier when I'm coding things. Also, for example, over here, if I were going to go in and type in information on my CSS and I say pound second, and then I throw in one bracket, it throws in my second bracket automatically, right? If I'm going in to do font, it's telling me here are some common options. So I don't have to go look up everything. If I'm like, you know what, I know I want my font weight to be something, then it's preloading information here for me. Great. Bolder. Awesome. Semicolon. Next. Font family. Great. I want fantasy. Fantastic. Hit enter on that one. So it can really save you a lot of time when you're editing your code. So for example, what I might choose to do is come over here, copy all of my code from here on Infusionsoft, go back over to my code editor here, and paste it all within here. Now, for example, on this particular one, the reason it's not giving it all that nice coloring is it thinks it's an HTML file. And so what I would actually want to do is make sure I'm adding a new CSS file, add a new document. What I typically do here is I actually just go in here and I add a new file and I give it a name. So style2.css. When it's a CSS file, then it knows when I paste that information in there to read it as CSS. So that makes it a lot easier to utilize. Let's see, next one here. Trish, did I actually, David, did I clarify for you the order there? What takes priority? Elements, classes, IDs. Let me know if you have some further information or further questions there. Trish, same as well with those indicators, the periods, the hashtags or pound signs rather. Let me know if you need any further clarification there. Daniel was asking on some property values in Firebug style window, you can click on it to edit it and then use the up and down arrows. Yeah, great observation there. So one of the things that Daniel's pointing out here is, for example, if I wanted to go in and I'm working on, say, for example, my font size right here, okay? Notice right here where I click font size, I can actually just hit up and down to change some of that information, okay? So that's something to be aware of. Colors, looks like Colors does that as well. So I can go in and change some of that color information, and you're able to then make some slight tweaks to things. Again, the nice thing about Firebug is it doesn't actually change the code that is generating the page. It's just changing the code that you view. Okay, so once I refresh, all those changes that I've made within Firebug would go away, and I'm set back to where I was, right? This thing went back to full size and otherwise. So that's one of the nice things there about Firebug. Let's see. Why is some of the code on the far right in Firebug have a line drawn through it? So she's noticing the fact that right here it says font family sans serif, and that is crossed out. Now that goes back to the question that was asked here a little bit earlier, where David was asking about what takes priority, elements, classes, or IDs. And what it's saying is right here, there is this particular line in the code, line 2, where it says HTML font family sans serif. Let me show you what that is, okay? It's saying line 2. So if I go back over here to my style sheets, on line 2, it says HTML, font family, sans serif. It calls it out right here. But then what it's also showing is this body portion, this HTML and body portion, which, by the way, right here where it says HTML comma body, it's actually saying for the HTML tag and the body tag, I want it to apply this particular definition, these declarations here of height and 100%. You can define it for a grouping of things at the same time. So the reason some of this information is crossed out, Monique, what it's telling us there is while this was defined somewhere at the very beginning, it defined font family, it was then overridden later right here where it says body font family. Okay, so for example, notice right here how it says body class. Well, we were talking about a particular portion here, right? If I pull this up, this particular portion, this contains the ID page content. It is within a portion here that says HTML as well. So basically, there are things that are in contradiction. Font family here, font family here. So it's telling us that while this one's defined, it was overridden later on based on the priority. This one was on line 5, whereas this was on line 2. The one that is most recently defined is the one that will override. So hopefully that clarifies there for you, Monique. Great question. Way to be very attentive on that one. Clara, great to see you here. It's always fun to see a familiar name. Clara was one of my coaching clients a year or two ago. Clara asks, will we have access to this webinar for future viewing? Yes, I am recording this webinar, Clara. I will post it, make it available. Feel free to follow me on Twitter or just check out our mastermind page at help.infusionsoft.com/mastermind. And once I have this converted, I will post it here underneath Mastermind Archives. It'll be the top one. And what you can be able to do is click through, download some information. Now, one of the things that I also haven't pointed out, I have a file that I'm going to add here. It will say download additional resources. I've got a file here that I'm going to give to you guys. And that file is something that Jordan Hatch here put together a while back. And he called it the Infusionsoft Mastermind CSS Cheat Sheet. What this is, this really just summarizes a lot of what I've spoken about here as well, where we've got the pound signs as far as these selectors, the period identifies the classes versus the IDs. We've got our paragraph tags, our P tags, H1s, H2s, and A's for all links. He talks about that combining of CSS selectors as well, which is ways that we can define a very specific element. So for example, here, this is defining all of those paragraphs that have a class of class name. Okay, so now we're saying all paragraphs that have a particular class name. It's kind of combining two different elements to really get specific with what we're defining, or a paragraph with this particular ID name. And then he also goes into some of these common styling properties that you might use, defining the background or the font or the color. We also added some additional information down here below, what you can do to go in and change some styles in here, changing gradients on a navigation bar, changing fonts used on a page. So that's some information that I will post up and make accessible for you on the download page as well. There will be an extra link right here that says download additional resources once I get these posted. So that's where you will have access to it. Neil here says Firebug, best thing I've learned about all week. Neil, Firebug's actually fantastic, and here's why. If you ever see somebody's site and you're like, man, I really like that site, how did they do it? Pull out Firebug. If you're wondering, hey, what did we do here? How did we put in, this particular thing, or how did we set this up right here? Well, we've got it pulls in all of those styles, so you can go in and start to look at what's going on. Okay, how are we using those CSS styles? And you can begin to learn from other people that do what you want to do. Okay, again, if you don't know much about code, I'm not encouraging you to go in and make any sorts of wild page layout changes and such. You may want to get somebody else involved on that one that really knows how to do that. But if you're wanting to make some small tweaks and changes, man, Firebug's a great way to go deconstruct something and understand what is impacting it. Again, over here, we've got a number of different options here within our style sheets that are defining how this particular page works. Or maybe you want to see how they do some just some different layouts on any of the pages that you might have. That's a great way to do it. Let's see, Robert, I appreciate the feedback there. Most definitely. If you got any specific questions, please feel free to give me some feedback on that one so I can clarify for you. Dawn says, how do you make images resizable to fit in a table or header, for example, a logo? Well, there's a couple things that you can do on that one. So for example, on that one, let me, I've got something here I was working with earlier, helpcenter.infusionsoft.com. Okay, this is one that that I know Jordan Hatch put together previously. And if I go here to inspect my element with Firebug, he had a picture here that he placed within there. And what he ended up having on that was he customized the width of that particular image. So again, if I go back into the one that I was working on, let me pull up my code here. Remember, I have an image within here. It says image ID icon image. And let me pull up that page that we were actually working with. Let me go to scottrichens.com/demo/test.html. Okay. If I wanted to work with the sizing of this particular image, I can come over here to my icon image option and I could insert a width. And what I could then do on that is say my width here is 30 pixels. Okay, I'm not certain how big that particular image right now is, but notice how it just resized. So you can just resize that particular image there. Again, obviously that's too small. So if I didn't want to sit here and keep guessing, instead what I would do is just come over here to Firebug and say, you know what? I want this picture right in here. So my picture width is 30. Let's try some different things here. And it looks like about 75 is where I want to be. Great. Then I'll come back over here, say 75, save my information, refresh, and now that's in my code. Don, does that help there for you? You've got different options there. Again, anytime that you're wondering on that kind of stuff, if you're curious, what can I do? Well, you can bounce over to W3 Schools, and I might just say, give it a moment. Suddenly my internet's a little bit slow. I can go on there and I can just type in image and it will give me some of those different property values that I can begin to utilize. Raquel, thank you for the feedback there. Good to have you here on the call. Scott, awesome. Thanks for the feedback. Raquel's asking, is this recordable or downloadable? Again, yes, I do make those available. After the call, it takes some time for those to download. But if you go here to the Mastermind page, you can click the Mastermind archives. We actually have the past couple months here that are archived. You can also, once I post the recording, it will be available here. You can click through on it and download it. Sharon asked a good question here. Sharon said, do you recommend copying the CSS from Customer Hub into a Notepad document before you make any changes? Sharon, one of the things that I like to do personally, because I've learned the hard way a few different times, is if I'm ever going to go in and make changes to code that is live code, I typically don't make changes to live code. But if I am, so for example, if I'm going to go in and change this code right within here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my, what's the appropriate word for this? I'll just call it my whoops contingency plan, meaning I'm going to copy all of this and I'm going to save it somewhere. So if a change I make goes wrong and I don't remember what the change was or where I made it from, I have this to go back to. I'll copy all this, so if I copy, I would go then paste all of that in a new document and save that state, save that snapshot of that point in time, so that I can always revert back to that if I needed to. So that's one of the best things that I do. Like I said, I've learned that the hard way. I made a change and I didn't know how to get back to where I was because I didn't like the change. Israel, did that answer your question as well? You were asking the question, next question I saw here was, if I make the code of my web page somewhere else, can I paste that code into Customer Hub? Israel, you can modify that information. Here's the thing with the way Customer Hub is all set up. The way all of these different elements are coded on the page, it is referencing these specific classes and IDs. So if you are going to code it outside of Customer Hub, what I would recommend that you do is make sure that you are using these same classes and IDs, so that when the page loads, it is looking at the right information in your code. Does that make sense there, Israel? Okay, perfect. Kai asked, can I do a webinar on basic HTML? Kai, if that's something that we need to do, yes, we can. Here's another thing that I want to point out to you, something called Code Academy. If you want to start learning some basics on that stuff, Kai, this is a great place to go. You can go to Code Academy here and get started, and it just walks you through step by step, starting to teach you some of this stuff. It's very well put together. You've got a lot of activities as you go through it. So Kai, if you've got interest in learning some code, Code Academy is a great place to go. There's also some other places to do it. But you basically notice right here it's saying type your username with quotes. So it's having you sign up already. Well, in my case, it would be Scott. Boom. Good. Okay, so now it's saying type alert message, where message can be any text you want. So if now I'm saying alert, hello world, right? Boom, that's showing me how to create an alert. So it's actually pretty slick. So that's a great place to go for you. Let's see right here. Beth, what is the proper way to define height of table cells in an HTML table using CSS? We're trying height 25 pixels and it's not working. Beth, I believe in that one. You've got to make sure that you're calling out the right element there. Are you calling out your table row element? That's what we would need to take a look at there. If you're defining your TD, you may need to look at your table row on that particular one, Beth, to define the height of each individual row on that particular one. Something to take a look at there. Neil says, Infusionsoft CSS cheat sheet. I want that. Great. I will definitely have that posted for you. Let's see. Don was looking for here. Can it be resized automatically to fit rather than trying to specify a size in pixels? Don, I believe it can, and that's gonna be looking at a different type of identifier here. So remember when I was defining my icon image, my width here, okay, there's a way, I believe, to identify it based on a different element within there. I don't know that one off the top of my head, Don, to give that information to you. I would take a look there within W3 Schools on that, or even just go to Google and do a quick search there. KT, again, yes, I will post the cheat sheet there along with the video that I post. Raquel, yeah, drop me an email on that one, Raquel. I know we were chatting about that before, so go ahead and drop me an email there. Israel's asking, you're asking here, Israel, if I made the code of my web page somewhere else, can I paste that code into Infusionsoft? Is that the same? I think that was the same question you asked there a little bit earlier, Israel. So awesome. Thanks for reposting that there. I think we got to that. Let's see. Daniel said, for an oops fallback, you could comment the line you want to change, then type the new line under it. Awesome idea there, Daniel. So this was going back to what I was talking about there with Sharon, what Daniel was talking about. And there's an option that you can use here within your CSS codes. So let me open that up. One of the things that you're able to do is comment something out. So for example, where this says normalize, that's just me adding words. That's me adding information. So what Daniel was suggesting is, say for example, I wanted to modify this body information, but I didn't want to lose it. Instead of having to copy everything out and then paste it all back in, what he said he does is he would just go in here, and within CSS, you can add your comment like this. So it's a /*, and then down below, you close the comment with an */. And basically what that does is it tells the code to ignore this entire portion. So if you comment out the original portion, that won't be impacted. Then what I could go in and do is modify this particular portion, see if I like it, great. If I like it, I can just ditch this part. Or if I don't like it, great, I get rid of this, and then I just uncomment this particular portion. It's back live. So Daniel, great reminder there of using the comments to be able to do something. I was demonstrating that here a little bit earlier when I pull up my site here. Remember, the very first thing that I had was in my HTML code. HTML has a different comment indicator. So if I do that here, basically if I comment out my CSS entirely, I go back to just my pure, plain, basic, no CSS, no styling. And so that's a handy thing when you're wanting to turn things on and off to see how they impact it. Let's see. Israel, is there a webinar about Customer Hub available to download? Depends on which part of Customer Hub that you're looking at. We've run a couple webinars recently where we're talking about the capabilities of Customer Hub and some things that you can do going in there and stylizing those. I may be able to find some links on that one, Israel. Also do a quick Google search there for Infusionsoft Customer Hub webinar, and we should have a couple things come up there that you can download. If you can't find those, give me a shout out and I will see what I can help you out on. We haven't done as many mastermind webinars on Customer Hub as that is one of our add-on products. A majority of our users are using Infusionsoft, and then a smaller subset are using Customer Hub. So I don't usually focus on that one as much, but if that's something of interest, I am more than happy to go in and do some more Customer Hub webinars. So feel free, Israel, to go recommend that particular topic. Again, you can do that here at mastermindwebinars.uservoice.com. It looks like we're about at the end of the questions here. Actually, not about at the end. That is the end of the questions. So if there are any other questions on that, feel free to give me a shout out here, and I'll do what I can to help you out. Otherwise, we will wrap up here in just a few moments. So I'll leave about 20 more seconds here. Again, reminder on a couple things. Virtual Academy, it's another webinar series that we've got. If you've got brand new folks that are new to Infusionsoft, trying to figure it out, send them over to the Virtual Academy, and I'll get them taken care of there. Infusionsoft University, you can check out more information there, infusionsoft.com/university. We're doing one here in Chandler in August, in Orlando in September, and we're coming down under to Sydney again in October. Details forthcoming on that one. This is a paid event that we do. We get phenomenal feedback from the customers that are in attendance. We have a really good time at that one. Most people come for all 4 days, find that they're learning stuff all 4 days on that one. First day may be a little bit slow if you're more advanced, but there's always some new stuff to be learning as we go. So I invite you to check that one out. Come join me and my team as we put on a good training session there for you. So looks like we're at the end of the webinar here. No additional questions. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a day, call it a wrap. Again, I will post the recording as soon as I can make it available. And thank you very much for being here with us today on the Mastermind webinar. I appreciate it. And I will look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Take care and have a great day.